Final tally is in, and the Colts 53-man roster is set. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of surprises here. The roster makeup right now probably isn't going to stay like this for very long, but it's very odd the way it's all set up. Okay, so let's go through all the roster moves today. We've kept you updated the last couple days. Everything that happened today, all the players that got waived. Linebacker Liam Anderson, safety Henry Black, safety Marcel Dabo. Now, Marcel Dabo is a little bit of an exception to this rule. The Colts are actually going to have 54 guys on the roster, but he doesn't actually count as a roster spot because he's part of the International Players Program coming over to the Colts in 2022. So he's going to stay on the practice squad still and be a depth piece for the Colts. But again, he doesn't count as a roster spot. Okay, then you keep moving forward. A couple of running backs that got waived, Jake Funk and Jason Huntley. Hey, the wide receivers that got waived today were DJ Montgomery, Mike Strawn, and Amari Rogers. Those two hurt a little bit. I feel like Mike Strawn was a little bit, predictable, but Amari Rogers was a guy that I thought could stay on this team as a sixth receiver. And there's a chance with him being waived, there's a chance he ends up on the Colts practice squad still. So we'll talk a little bit more about Amari Rogers in a few minutes, okay? Another surprising name on this list is cornerback Darius Rush. He was drafted by the Colts this year, and as I started to see things unfold, I thought that maybe this could be a possibility of him getting waived and then getting put on the practice squad. It'll be interesting to see if he gets picked up by somebody else or if he ends up on our practice squad. I do really hope he is able to end up on the Colts practice squad. But the reason I thought this might happen is because through training camp, we saw that Juju Brents was pretty much a guarantee to be on the roster. He's a second round pick, kid from Indiana, and you would expect second round pick, he's probably going to be on the team, right? So he's going to be on the team. And then Jalen Jones also ends up on the team. And with everything that he did in training camp and everything that he put on tape in the preseason games, on both in special teams and on defense, it was obvious that Jalen Jones had a spot on this team. So unfortunately for Darius Rush, he looks like he's going to be kicked down to the practice squad. But then also, one thing of note, in my opinion, is the fact that cornerback Bradley Roby was released by the Saints today. And because that happened, that was the move that made me think, okay, maybe Darius Rush gets kicked down. Maybe we bring Bradley Roby onto the Colts and he ends up taking a sixth roster spot, and maybe he could be somebody that I don't know if he would be a depth piece or a starter. I know this team really likes Dallas Flowers and they like DJ Baker. Of course, Kenny Moore is going to be starting. So I think bringing Bradley Roby in would be a great idea. And I think that's something that could happen now that Darius Rush has been waived. Okay, a couple other corners that got waived today were Isaac Taylor Stewart and Kevin Tolliver. And then the last two moves here, again, these ones not really a surprise at all, is going to be Caleb Sampson, defensive tackle, and Dakota Shepley were officially waived today. Okay, so then you move on to the players that were released. And honestly, there are a couple of surprises in here also. There was going to be a couple of surprises. It was tough coming down to the wire who was going to make this team. But what we have here is Pharaoh Brown, who I think we kind of expected. Ronnie Harrison Jr., who I feel like most people expected to be released, but I was just kind of hopeful that he'd be on the team instead of Trevor Denbo. Turns out Trevor Denbo ends up making the team. It didn't even end up being Henry Black. I don't know why they like Trevor Denbo so much. I feel like I always see him miss tackles, but he's still on the team. So we'll see what happens. Okay. But another guy that got released was Al-Qadim Muhammad, which we talked about being a possibility in the Derek Barnett video. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. But then you have tackle Dan Skipper that got released. And then the wide receivers. Okay, Brashad Perriman was officially released today. The news of that happened yesterday, but he was officially released today. And then Vincent Smith, not a surprise. James Washington, officially released today. But the biggest surprise, I think, coming out of all this was Juwan Winfrey. When all the moves started happening, when we heard that Brashad Perriman wasn't going to make the team, it felt like there was a spot for Juwan Winfrey. It really did. And the fact that he's not even getting waived is kind of interesting. I wonder if they're going to release him and already have it set up to where he has a contract that he's going to sign and he's going to come be on the Colts practice squad and have a deal like that. It's interesting. Going to keep my eye on Juwan Winfrey to kind of see what happens with him. Again, kind of surprising. I thought there was a spot for him on the 53-man roster. But besides that, the other roster moves today are JoJo Doman going on the injury reserve, Titus Leo, the edge rusher, rookie edge rusher, going on the IR, Danny Pinter on IR, and tight end Ricky Seals-Jones on the IR. So these guys are not taking up roster spots, but the Colts still have control over what happens with them until the point that they have to come off the IR. And then, of course, Jonathan Taylor, same thing. He goes on the PUP and they control what happens with Jonathan Taylor until further notice. Okay, so just a quick rundown of the 53-man roster as it sits. Okay, again, this is kind of weird, which is why I want to go through it. Okay, you have three quarterbacks. We know who those three are, right? Ellinger, Minshew, Richardson. Running backs right now, there are only three because Jonathan Taylor was placed on the PUP list. There are only three running backs on this team. That is Evan Hull, Deion Jackson, and Zach Moss. Okay, and Zach Moss is not expected to be ready for week one. So what are we going to do, right? Is it time for the Colts to call in Kareem Hunt? Feels like that might be the move. The Colts, the whole thing with Jonathan Taylor, like if Jonathan Taylor spends the entire season on the PUP list, it's the exact same thing as spending the season on the NFI list. Okay, which means if Jonathan Taylor does not play and does not come off the PUP list, the last year of his rookie contract will go into 2024. He has to play at some point. So it'll be interesting to see, do they decide to bring on another running back? And if they do bring on another running back, does that mean that they're really going to try to move Jonathan Taylor at some point? But again, they don't have to. That's where the Colts had the leverage. They don't have to move on for Jonathan Taylor. So it'll be interesting to see. Going into the season with three running backs and only two healthy running backs is very worrisome. So they have to do something. But going to be monitoring this situation to see what the Colts decide to do. And another interesting situation is the wide receivers. Right now, there are only 4 wide receivers on the roster after everything happened, which is why I think Juwan Winfrey is an interesting situation. Like maybe it's not even the fact that he's signing a deal to come onto the practice squad. Maybe they're releasing Juwan Winfrey, but offering him a 1-year contract to be the 5th receiver on this team. So that's something I expect. If that's going to happen, that'll happen pretty quickly. So if it does happen, I'll get a video to you guys about that as soon as I can. But right now, the wide receivers are Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, Isaiah McKenzie, and Josh Downs. Okay, so with there being room opened up in the running back room and the wide receiver room currently, they're able to have 5 tight ends and 9 offensive linemen. Okay, Mo Alley Cox, Kylan Granson, Will Mallory, Drew Ogletree, and Jelani Woods are the tight ends that they're keeping in-house. And the offensive linemen are all the guys that we've talked about, right? And then the one surprise here is Carter O'Donnell. But because of the way, the running backs are and the way the wide receivers are currently, they're able to keep an extra offensive lineman. And again, I expect something to change here pretty soon. But at the current moment, that's what we have. Okay, and then on the defensive side of the ball, defensive line also has 9 guys. And the surprises here, obviously, Al-Qadim Muhammad's not a part of it, but also Taven Bryan ends up staying on the team, which I know a lot of people thought he would. He was second on the depth chart behind Grover Stewart. Both everybody else accounted for and the edge rushers and everything, I thought they would want to keep edge rushers. But they end up keeping an inside guy in Taven Bryan and another inside guy, Eric Johnson II, who's a guy that I know the team is high on, but he's a young guy. And again, somebody that I thought might end up getting waived and put on the practice squad. I didn't think he would make the 53-man roster, right? But then you look at the linebackers. The one surprise here is Cameron McGrone. The only reason this is a surprise is because I thought he'd end up, either waived or released or on the practice squad. And I thought JoJo Doman would make the active roster. And I think that could have happened. But again, JoJo Doman was placed on the injured reserve. So Cameron McGrone is on the active roster. All the other guys, though, are who we thought it'd be, right? Zaire, Shaq, Segan Alubi, EJ Speed, and Grant Stewart all make the team. Right now, I already mentioned all the corners that we're going into the season with, except for Tony Brown. Somehow Tony Brown makes the team. I assume that's because of his special teams experience and the fact that Darius Rush doesn't have that experience. But the reason Bradley Roby's still a possibility is because Jalen Jones can play special teams and was really good on special teams in the preseason. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had him playing special teams and brought Bradley Roby in to be a depth piece at corner. Okay, so you go beyond that, you have the safeties, Julian Blackman, Nick Cross, Trevor Denbo, and Rodney Thomas. And the special teams is Matt Gay, Luke Rhodes, and Rigoberto Sanchez. Okay, so that is currently, after all the roster cuts, this is the immediate 53-man roster. As things continue to change, I will let you guys know. But I'm also going to have a video for you guys tomorrow going over some guys as I continue to look through everybody that got released and waived today. I'm going to look through everything and come up with guys that I think we should be targeting. Bradley Roby, of course, going to be a part of that. I won't go over him as much in that video because I did hear, but there are definitely some things that I think the Colts should do, some very interesting names that hit the waiver wire today. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you stay updated when all these videos come out. And until then, as always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and go Colts.